You enemy of the people, I, Richard Hawke, won't let you get away with it. I, Richard Hawke, will uphold American justice without fail.
Yeah! Suck on my missile punch!
So one thing that has pretty disturbed me over the last couple years is the way we have treated in Britain these runaway brides of ISIS. Now, people will think when I'm saying these things, how can you have any sympathy for them? They went over and joined this awful, brutal caliphate. We've seen all the awful things they've done on videos. We've seen all the atrocities they're responsible for. But I think when people like Jeremy Corbyn get attacked for saying we should treat them more humanely, I don't think the sentiment is wrong. And I think the whole situation isn't lumped in with a fear or disgust at the Islamic State in so much that it is cemented in racism, in that if these young women who went to join ISIS were white women joining a cult of some kind that was just as brutal as ISIS but maybe not Islamic, I think there'd be more sympathy. And you can see in the past, people who join cults, people who are in neo-Nazi groups, when they come out of it, they get widely praised. But when you have someone like her leaving the Islamic State after joining, she gets her British citizenship stripped from her. So I'm going to give you the story if you guys haven't heard it before. So a Guardian article from the other day says, Shamimi Begum says her world fell apart after losing UK citizenship. Pictured in a tent where she now lives in a refugee camp in northeast Syria, the 20-year-old said the decision made by the former Home Secretary Sajid Javid was not wholly unexpected, but she'd hoped for more lenient treatment. I kind of saw it coming because I did do my research just before I came out. I thought it would be a bit different because I had not done anything wrong before I came to ISIS. Begum said in an interview with US broadcaster ABC News, "When my citizenship got rejected, I felt like my whole world fell apart right in front of me. You know, especially the way I was told. I wasn't even told by the government, I was told by journalists." Earlier this month, Begum lost an appeal in a British court against having her British citizenship revoked last year by Javid. Although Begum had only lived in the UK before travelling to Syria to join the Islamic State, the court held that she was eligible to apply for citizenship of Bangladesh, the birth country of her parents. The broadcaster found Begum at the Al-Roj camp in Kurdish-run northeast Syria, where she was living in a relatively spacious heated tent with Kimberly Pullman, a US Canadian in her 40s, who's waiting to hear whether she will be allowed to return to either country. Begum entered the news again a year ago after she was discovered at a different refugee camp by a journalist from The Times, 4 years after she'd originally fled the UK to join ISIS. At the time she was heavily pregnant with her third child, but the infant, Jarrah, died shortly after he was born. The Times journalist said Begum seemed almost unrepentant in that some of her other early interviews at the time she said, "I don't regret coming here." But Begum, who had come to the camp from the final ISIS redoubt in Baghuz, told ABC she felt threatened at the Al-Hal camp when she arrived a year ago. "I had just given birth, I was hearing all these stories about women threatening other women, you know, folk uncovering their faces or speaking to men or doing interviews or anything like that. I was just afraid for my life," she told ABC. Begum is one of around 4,000 foreign women from more than 50 countries living in refugee camps in northeast Syria. The Syrian Kurdish authorities have said they will start putting on trial some of the 1,000 male foreign fighters held separately in prisons, but it's unclear what will happen to the women. So you guys might think it's fairly clear cut, you know, she went to join the Islamic State from Britain. Why should we give her British citizenship? Why should she keep it? Now, you heard there that she had a child about a year ago who died. And you probably seen, if you were British, the awful rhetoric online about her, people using her as a target in gun practices and things like that. The army were doing that. And my whole problem with it is that this isn't what justice looks like. You don't strip someone of their British citizenship when they're pregnant and have children and let them rot in some camp in Syria. What you would do in a civilized society is you'd bring her home. If she's guilty of something, which I'm sure she would be from going to join ISIS, you put her in prison. Do you know what you do with the children? You give them to her family. I don't understand what's so hard about that, but it's obvious the right-wing government in this country were just trying to get an easy victory by stripping her of her citizenship. She's lived here her whole life. She didn't live in Bangladesh. So saying you can apply for citizenship there, it's wrong. And yes, she joined the Islamic State, but guess what? She was also 15 years old. She was groomed online by terrorists and that's why she went to join them. Why is there no sympathy for that? We've all heard stories of people who've been groomed. We've all seen how destructive it can be, especially if someone gets you young, and how easily you can be brainwashed. 15 is so young. I would say even if she was 18 or something like that, like some of my younger relatives are that age, and I would say they're still so naive and you could easily be brainwashed. So 15 years old she was groomed and she went over there. So it's just a child who's been groomed, right? And the life she's known probably when she went over was so brutal and awful. And again, we have no sympathy. Go rot in Syria. We don't care what happens to you. You're not part of our country anymore. People think this woman is personally accountable for what she did, but again, being groomed at 15, we show so much more sympathy to loads of other people who've been groomed at this age for a variety of reasons. But because she's Muslim from Bangladeshi descent, because she joined the Islamic State, somehow this 15-year-old is personally accountable for all her choices made. Again, I don't understand the logic we're using here. And I'm not saying you must welcome her back with open arms and let her join society. But what I am saying is she is from this country, she has children, she's vulnerable. Take her back and then put her in prison for however long you want or whatever you feel is necessary. De-radicalise her. She probably realises by now she's only 20 years old. Pope Benedict was in the Nazi army until he was 17 years old. Did we say this guy was unredeemable? Did we say this guy should have just been put in jail forever? He joined the Nazis, right? And we're not skeptical about that going forward. She joined the Islamic State when she was 15. She was groomed by a man. She's now 20. She said she doesn't believe in it as much anymore. She wasn't repentant last year. But again, I don't care if she's repentant or not. She belongs in this country and we have to deal with her in this country, not strip our hands of her and say, yeah, some Kurds in Syria, you will deal with her and you'll look after her and you'll decide what happens to her. That's just not the way justice works. And please see this through another lens rather than Islamic terrorism and maybe some racist prejudices. This is a girl who at 15 was groomed by awful, awful people. It worked so well they convinced her to journey to the Islamic State and live there as a wife to an ISIS fighter where she had his children. 15 years old. Again, let's have some sympathy and compassion and not just leave her there for whatever's going to happen to her. And you know, the region she's in at the moment is pretty volatile because the US have sold out the Kurds. So again, it's our responsibility. You don't have to say, come here, have a lovely life, never deal with any consequences. Because, yeah, maybe there should be some consequences. But she was 15 when she went there. She's now 20. She's still a young person. She can still totally change her mind with the right help. Leaving her to rot in Syria is not the right way to deal with this. And I'm sure if this wasn't about Islamic terrorism, if this was about a cult that maybe hated England or whatever and they were white, I'm sure we'd have a lot more sympathy. I'm sure we'd have a lot more sympathy if she joined like a neo-Nazi group or something. But obviously in this country, because of racism, prejudice against Muslims, all this type of stuff, we have no sympathy for this woman, even though she had a young child when she was asking to come back, who subsequently died. So the blood of that child is essentially on the British government. And why did they do it? Because you can't handle one more woman in prison, all the money you've been cutting from services, all the money our taxes go into that fund stuff we don't want, all the stupid Brexit stuff, and you're saying you can't take this one woman back to save her children, essentially. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments. I know it's a complicated one, but I think at the very least we can agree these women should be taken back and dealt with because they are British citizens, not stripping them of their citizenship and just wiping our hands of the whole thing. But yeah, let me know in the comments, like the video, maybe subscribe. Check me out on social media, that is just at The Cavernacle on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. Reddit is the main one for me, so please join my subreddit, which is r/The Cavernacle. Please check out my personal Reddit account, which is u/TommyCahill1995. Check out my Patreon in the description, check out my WordPress, and if you made it this far, thank you for watching.